Hey there, Sooner football fans. Parker Thune alongside Jesse Crittenden here for another installment of Quick Slants, where we give you a brief look, a rapid fire look, if you will, at all of the relevant storylines today in the world of OU football. We just spoke with Brent Venables hours ago. We spoke with several players last night. The Sooners are going to host Houston in week 2 coming up on Saturday evening. And Jesse, the guy that's currently the toast of the town is one Tyler Keltner, 3 for 3, including a make of beyond 50 yards, the first for the Oklahoma football program since October 30th, 2021 in the season opener against Temple. And it was really interesting to hear Keltner talk about his mindset when he goes out there to kick. Here's what he had to say when we caught up with him last night.
You might not believe me, but I get more nervous watching kickers on TV than me when I'm kicking by myself. When it's me out there in a game, there's a certain calmness that comes through, and I like I said, I think it's just everybody practicing. I'm just so confident in everybody and confident in what I do, and I go out there and it's just like pure bliss. Watching people on TV kick, I'm like, man, what are they gonna do? How's their operation? They've been practicing. What are they doing? But when it's us and when it's me, it's the best feeling in the world.
Now, look, Jesse, Keltner's still a 76% kicker, whereas the performance in week 1 is certainly the confidence builder that you want a guy like that to have. He may also regress to the mean. That's certainly a possibility. But certainly, without question, that's the type of mindset that you want your kicker to be walking out on the field with, an innate ability to just block out the noise.
Yeah, it was really particularly interesting to hear him talk about how he gets nervous himself watching other kickers play in games, just like fans do. But for some reason, when he's on the field, he's just really confident in himself. And you heard even Luke Elzinga, the punter, last night also talk about how his work ethic is second to none. I think sometimes there's player speak or coach speak when it comes to different things. But I think when it comes to Tyler Keltner's work ethic, it's real. I think he has a real confidence and a real preparation in what he does. And it's not just, I mean, look, it is 1 week in a very long football season. There's a lot of things that can happen between now and the end of the season. Even Zach Schmidt had some good moments the last 2 years. I think the difference is for Keltner, it's not only going 3 for 3 on kicks, but it's that first one being a 50-yarder. It's that second one being a 42-yarder. I mean, you even look at the last 2 years. I mean, Zach Schmidt on kicks of 40 yards or longer last year went 2 of 4. Over the last 2 years on kicks of 50 yards or more, he went 0 of 3. Keltner comes out, bangs a 42-yarder, bangs a 50-yarder. I think that's just and in his first game as a Sooner, he goes out and does that. So I think there's a healthy balance between not saying Tyler Keltner is going to save the OU special teams unit, but also feeling reasonably confident that things are different this year and that OU's got their man kicking field goals.
Now, here's what else was particularly compelling coming out of Friday night, because I mentioned it in the OU Insider Under the Visor postgame podcast, Jesse, and I'll reiterate it. You can't really put a whole lot of stock into the performance of the first teamers unless it's just ostensibly bad, objectively bad. Spencer Brown, right? That's not what you want to see. But a starter has a good night against a team like Temple, you take it with a grain of salt. Okay, it's Temple. But a second or a third teamer has a good performance, really flashes. That's something you pay attention to. And one guy that Billy Bowman highlighted as somebody that every Sooner fan should have on their radar going forward is freshman safety Michael Boganowski, who was a missile on a couple of occasions when he got in the game Friday night against Temple.
Yeah, it's crazy that you say a freshman is the hardest hitter on the team, but yeah, I think he probably is the hardest hitter on the team, and that's what he does well. I would say that's what stands out about him. Uncommon effort, fly to the ball, and will completely knock your head loose.
I think it's pretty clear, Jesse, that Oklahoma has the depth at safety such that they don't really need to rush Boganowski into action, but if he looks the way he did on Friday night moving forward in non-conference play, his opportunities are going to continue to proliferate.
Yeah, he had a particular play in that second half where he just launched himself at a Temple player with almost an alarming level of lack of awareness how dangerous that play was. But that's how he plays. I mean, he had a similar play or a couple plays even in the spring game And I think that's why you hear a veteran like Billy Bowman say a freshman on the team might be the most aggressive tackler on the team. And look, Boganowski played 14 snaps against Temple. OU was able to unload the bench for the most part. They played more than 40 guys on both sides of the ball. But I think Boganowski showed enough that I think he can have kind of a spot role for this team. It's going to be hard to get substantial snaps when you've got Billy Bowman, Peyton Bowen, Robert Spears Jennings ahead of you. But it's clear that this kid has something different to him that OU doesn't have, and probably any other position group on the team. And given how highly he was recruited, how high the staff was on him when they brought him on, I don't think there's any reason to think that he couldn't have a role where he plays 10 snaps a game. And I think it's because of that reckless abandon that he plays with. And you saw that on Friday night.
And you'd love to be able to get through the season relying on just 3 safeties and Billy Bowman and Peyton Bowen and Robert Spears Jennings. Is that entirely realistic? I don't really think so. And it's at that point, if you have to go to a 4th guy right now, that 4th guy is probably Michael Boganowski. Now, speaking of freshmen whose opportunities are going to increase in the weeks ahead, how about the performance that Taylor Tatum had on Friday night? Here was Brent Venables earlier today when prompted to offer some praise to the freshman running back.
Marco says he's smiling too much. And so I'll let some point in time Taylor tell you about that. But Taylor is incredibly talented. He has a light inside of him that you spend 5 minutes around him, you're like, man, I like this guy. He's an easy guy to pull for. He likes to play. He likes the locker room. He likes to compete. He's incredibly, talented. Again, he only played a few snaps, and we threw him in there on the special teams too. He did well with his opportunity, and will earn more of an opportunity. And he's been pretty good so far.
Yeah, that kid can ball, Jesse. That kid can ball, and it's a deep Oklahoma backfield. It's a talented Oklahoma backfield. But the early indications are that Taylor Tatum might just be as good as anybody else in the mix there for carries.
Look, there's a couple of things that Venables said that really stood out to me. And the first one was that he's done well with his opportunity and he's going to earn more. I think that is a notable thing, for one, indicating that Tatum is on the coaching staff's radar when it comes to backfield playing time. I think that's one. And two, I thought it was interesting that Brent issued a little bit of a challenge, if you read it that way, basically saying, I don't know how hard he works at putting in extra time, which means I think there's kind of a test that they've put out to the true freshmen to seize an opportunity for playing time. And I don't think it's a question about Taylor Tatum's work ethic. I think it's, hey, we've got a true freshman that could play. Let's push him a little bit. And you look at the way the running backs played on Friday night, and look, it is just Temple. Again, we should just say that now, and that can be covered for every discussion about that game. Don't put too much stock into it. Having said that, look, he got 18 snaps on Friday night. That's just one fewer than Javonte Barnes, only a handful fewer than Gavin Sawchuk. I think it's pretty clear that Taylor Tatum was the most impressive running back in that game on Friday. I mean, he had carries at 35 yards, 19 yards. He had the only rushing touchdown for Oklahoma in that game. Also, the only 3rd down conversion for Oklahoma in that game on that touchdown run. It's clear he's in the top 3. I think it's clear that there's still some shuffling that could be done when it comes to the pecking order at running back. I don't think anything's a done deal. And I actually think if you're looking at what can be decided in these next couple of games against Houston and Tulane, I think there's an opportunity for Taylor Tatum to make a case that he deserves more time, and that's going to be one of the things to watch over the next couple of weeks.
And it's one thing if you or I say you can expect to see Taylor Tatum's opportunities increase. It's another thing when the head ball coach comes out and said, yeah, we plan to give this guy more of a look going forward. If you know that Taylor Tatum is going to be given a fair shake in the backfield to earn what potentially may be a pretty cumbersome share of the snaps and of the touches, well, then at that point, what you also know is that it's entirely up to the kid. If he performs well, they're not going to keep him off the field. They're not going to keep him buried on that depth chart. So the next couple of weeks in particular are a proving ground for Taylor Tatum if he wants to carve out a greater role in the backfield. Now, as we turn the focus to the wide receiver position, This wasn't really on our radar, but Brent Venables mentioned that Jaquez Petaway, who didn't catch a pass Friday night, may not even have gotten in the game on Friday night. No, he was in there for just a few snaps here and
11
there.
snaps.
11 snaps. That's right. He's been dealing with a hamstring issue the last few weeks. Venables said he's back up to speed. He'll be a full go. He's going to be more involved in the offense, but Jaden Gibson, obviously on the shelf since fall camp with that injury that I think he suffered first week at camp. It was not long into fall camp before we got the unfortunate news that Jaden Gibson was going to be out for the season. Now you have Jalil Farouk on the sidelines for the next 6 to 8 weeks, potentially longer, depending on the expediency of the rehab process. And so there's going to be a need, not just an opportunity, Jesse, but a need for some of those wide receivers further down the depth chart to step up and make the most of the looks that they get in the passing game. And one of the first guys that you look at in that regard is Jaquez Petaway. Here's what Brent Venables said about Jaquez earlier today when we talked to the Sooners head coach.
He had a hamstring injury the last few weeks. It just kind of kept him from being full speed, and even going into last week, we didn't know what his availability was going to be. And but he's ready to go, and he can play inside and outside both. And so I think he's got a chance to have a really good career when it's all said and done.
So what do we think, Jesse? Count on seeing more Petaway, count on seeing more Zion Reagans, who Venables praised quite a bit in his coach's show on Monday night. Who do you think is next up to see an increase in snap count with Farouk down?
Yeah, it's an interesting thing to look at, especially when you're thinking about Nick Anderson's return, because all Brent had to say was that it's sooner rather than later in terms of when they expect him to be back. But that brings into question, okay, but how soon is sooner, and also how available is he going to be when he plays? So that puts the question, of course, on some of the other guys you mentioned, whether that's Ivan Carrion, Zion Kearney, Reagans. I think Petaway is the guy to really look at. Especially because of a couple of things. One, he's primarily played in the slot, but as we saw on Friday, Deion Burks has that slot receiver position kind of locked up. It's not just the 3 touchdowns. It's that in a game OU never didn't have control, he played 56, of 67 snaps. Even in a blowout game, OU needed Deion Burks on the field in the slot. So then the other part of that is Brent's talked about that Petaway can play inside and outside. So if Petaway, as a guy that has a year more of experience compared to those freshman wideouts, he's a guy that if he can play outside and be a little bit versatile, you would think he's a guy that can come out if he's healthy. So I did think it was a little interesting that he only played 11 snaps. Maybe the hamstring issue is the explanation for that. If he can get healthy, I do think he's a guy you look at on Saturday against Houston, not only to see how much playing time does he get, but where do they put him on the field, because they can't really put him in the slot. Do they feel comfortable putting him on the outside? That's the thing that I think you should watch moving forward.
And keep in mind, Jaquez Petaway was a top 100 overall recruit in the 2023 class. He was somebody that everyone in the country wanted. Every single program in the country wanted Jaquez Petaway. The Sooners won that battle over Texas. And now as a rising sophomore, again, if he's fully healthy with the injuries to Gibson and Farouk and the opportunities that J.J. Hester, quite frankly, squandered on Friday night against Temple with those couple of drops, the window is there if he can capitalize. And now finally, as we shift our attention to the defensive side of the ball, file this under things you want to hear your head ball coach saying about your defensive cornerstones.
Man, I love Dominic. He's a guy that likes it. He likes to be coached. He's a very communicative, relational guy. So he's going to ask you how your day's going, how your family is, before you can ask him how his day's going and how his family is. He cares about people, cares about his teammates, cares about his opportunity, cares about what you think of him as a player. And then really hungry and driven. He's willing to work and strain, and then that group as a whole, that's a group as a whole that's really transformed over the last couple of years.
Brent Venables sure loves him some Dominic Williams, Jesse, and he made a couple plays on Friday night. Again, does that tell us anything about the caliber of player Dominic Williams is? No, but what he did over the last 2 years at TCU certainly does. And early indications are that he is the exact same dude, if not a better version of the same dude that dominated for the Horned Frogs as a true freshman and then as a sophomore in 2023 before becoming the crown jewel of Oklahoma's portal haul late in the spring. So Dominic Williams, there is no question, Jesse, is somebody that's going to need to play and be asked to play a lot of snaps up front and win battles against some very talented trench players in the SEC. But the early returns on everything that he has provided, not just to the on-field product, but to the locker room, very strong.
No, yeah, exactly. And I think there's a couple of ways you can look at this. I mean, yeah, it's just Temple, but OU had 6 sacks in that game on Friday night. 4 of them were by the interior defensive line. You look at last season, through the first 3 games of last season, they only had 5 sacks. And it's not like OU was playing world beaters in those games either. I mean, that 3-game stretch included Arkansas State and Tulsa. And yet OU in their first game against Temple exceeds what they did through the first 3 games of last season. And I think that's important to note because the interior of the defensive line outside of the offensive line was probably the biggest question mark about this entire team coming into 2024. So it's great that you have someone like Jaden Jackson as a true freshman that's ready to come in and not only play a lot, but start right away. That's a big deal. It's a big deal if someone like Grayson Halton can come in and make an impact for you. That maybe you get a lot of things from David Stone this year, but Dominic Williams is going to continue to be the key name to watch on this interior. He not only has the most experience, he's not only a veteran in a group that doesn't have a ton of playing time outside of him, but he's the guy that probably this year has the most potential to have the biggest impact on that interior of the defensive line. So I think it's it wasn't the most standout game for him, but I think it was a solid debut, and he's going to be the guy that OU needs to cause chaos, whether that's in 3-man fronts as the nose tackle or as a typical interior guy in 4-man sets. But they need him to show his veteran presence. They need him to show his experience. And yeah, it's just Temple, but considering the question marks about the interior, it was a pretty good start. And now if you're OU in that defensive line, you got to keep up that momentum, because that's going to be the position group to watch as OU heads into the SEC.
Well, folks, thanks for checking in with us on this week's installment of Quick Slants. Now, if you aren't a member over at OUinsider.com, that's a great place to be during the season. You get all the behind-the-scenes intel on not only the team, but OU football recruiting as well. We got basketball coverage, softball coverage. If you're a Sooner fan, there is no better place for you on the internet than OUinsider.com, and a subscription will cost you just a few bucks a month. Trust me, we'll make it worth your while and your investment. That is Jesse Crittenden. I am Parker Thune. We'll see you next week on Quick Slants. Take care, everybody.